Tēnā koutou katoa, mihi atu kia koutou. Excuse my voice, I'm a bit froggy from kind of a flu on the way over. Ko taranaki te maunga ko waitara te awa, ko tiati awa rau ko ngaitahu o ku iwi, o tākau tuku o ukai pō, ko rani re erihana rau ko nāni wala o ku tūpuna, ko Megan Tamati-Quennell taku ingoa. I'd first like to acknowledge the mana whenua, the Algonquin people of this land that I'm standing on, both past and present. I also want to thank the National Gallery of Canada and Greg, Candice and Cheryl, the three curators of Sakahàn, for inviting me to be here, and Lexi Buchanan for all her help and support with everything. So I'm going to start this way. I might drink water through it. As I said, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. Australian art historian Terry Smith contends in his book, Contemporary Art, World Currents, that in recent decades a worldwide shift from modern to contemporary art has occurred, that art has become a global phenomenon as art worlds everywhere began to connect more closely, and that new communication technologies and social media are now shaping the future of art. I would add that cheaper and more accessible international travel has contributed to the world becoming a smaller and more connected place. Smith goes on to say that the convergence, however, is not about a collapse into sameness, but that it instead places more emphasis on difference and, in my view, distinctiveness and individual inventiveness. Smith's ideas, I think, apply to this symposium with the theme of Indigenous Global Now, with contemporary Indigenous art able to provide a distinct voice, a voice that is culturally inflected with a critical edge. So in my talk today, I'm really going to focus on two Māori artists, Ralph Hortedy and Michael Parikowhai, who I recently curated into a show called Black Rainbow. The show takes its title from a series of works that Hortedy made in the mid-1980s, but it has relationship really to both the artists. Like Hortedy's prints, Black Rainbow was about marking something significant and attempting to encapsulate the essence of both artists' work. Work that is refined, self-assured and strong, but also holds those intangible and unknowable qualities. Works in writer David Eagleton's words about presence, but also about absence. Both artists, to me, are determinedly individual. Both meld concepts of the local and the global and transcend national boundaries with their work without, I believe, ceding their cultural specificity. Ralph Hortedy is recognised as one of New Zealand's most important contemporary artists. Of Te Rarawa and Te Aupōuri Māori descent, he was brought up in Miti, a remote Māori Catholic coastal community in the north of the North Island. He was born in 1931. Māori art historian Jonathan Mani Whioki describes Hortedy this way. Hortedy belongs at the forefront of the mainstream of New Zealand art history, but in a sense he also stands outside of it, both as a Māori and as one of the most cosmopolitan, sophisticated international artists New Zealand has yet produced. He was the first contemporary Māori artist to be recognised by the New Zealand art mainstream. This was achieved in 1961, with his work being included in the Auckland City Art Gallery's annual exhibition, Contemporary New Zealand Painting. For a long time, Hortedy was the only Māori artist acknowledged within the mainstream. He was also our first Māori international, leaving New Zealand in the same year, 1961, to take up a scholarship that supported him to study at the Central School of Art in London, and taking up a residency in Vence in the south of France the following year, and travelling to Italy. Hortedy returned to New Zealand in 1965 and never really left again, or not for long periods like the 4 years he spent travelling and painting in Europe, 1961 to 1965. Here's a quote from the exhibition catalogue, Hortedy New Paintings, Barry-Lett Galleries, Auckland, 1965. Hortedy's decision to return was not prompted by a lack of success, but by a deep desire to live and work in New Zealand. It would appear that Hortedy was on the verge of a major breakthrough in the London art scene, for his one-man exhibitions in Paris and London drew favourable comments from the leading art critics. There seems little doubt if Hortedy had elected to stay in London, major success was imminent. Hortedy's time overseas was a formative period in his career, during which he worked his way through contemporary European art and established his mature style. So this screen print here, which featured blocked colour, elemental shapes, and then words as integral to some of the images, reveal Hortedy's early experimentations with abstraction. So these works were made straight after he came back, about 1965. Some, they said, were even made on the boat that he travelled back on, some of the screen prints. His work moved from painterly expressionism, that was when he was in New Zealand, to hard-edged geometric abstraction like these ones after being in Europe, and evolved later to minimal abstraction. A quote from the Guardian newspaper, March 1964, describes Hortedy this way: Middlesbrough Art Gallery, making a bid for a niche in art history, is offering hospitality to a young Māori painter, Ralph Hortedy. It opens with a series of paintings, all concerned with various non-figurative interpretations of the Sangro River war cemetery on Italy's Adriatic coast, where the artist's brother and hundreds more of his fellow servicemen lie buried. In the best and most intellectual form of the pop art idiom, many of these make use of the stenciled numbers 22, 23, 24 and 25, the respective ages of many of the fallen. In their own quiet, occasionally hard-edged ways, many of these are undemonstratively anti-war, as are other pockets of resistance set up in the gallery, where Hortedy shows his 10-strong Tachiste white writing Polaris series painted at the height of the 1962 Cuban crisis. Now, I don't have images of those to show you, unfortunately. Hortedy was a first-generation contemporary Māori artist, or a Mardi Modernist, as they have recently become known. The Mardi Modernists were pioneers of a new form of Māori art. Their work reflected an increasingly urban Māori reality, post-World War II, 1945, and the changing social conditions in which Māori lived. Hortedy was acknowledged as one of the most progressive of this group, particularly by his contemporary Kataraina Mataira, an article she wrote about this new art. Their work was contemporary art rather than what is termed by Ngāhi Mason in her Sakahàn essay as heritage art, was individual rather than representing the collective, embraced the present, and mixed influences from international modernist artists including Pablo Picasso, Constantine Brancusi, Barbara Hepworth and Henry Moore, and others with Māori concepts. It also marked a change that it was art made intentionally for the art gallery rather than art made for the marae, or the Māori meeting house. Hortedy returned to Auckland in 1965, then later moved to Dunedin, kind of shunning the celebrity of the developing art scene that was beginning in Auckland. He was notorious for not talking or making statements about his work. Here's a quote from Ralph that I really like that highlights his position. "There are few things I can say about my work that are better than saying nothing." Ralph Hortedy, 1996. In 1968, the year before Hortedy moved to Dunedin, also the year Michael Parikowhai was born in, Hortedy exhibited his black paintings, and this is, even though it's not a very good image, is an image of one of his black paintings. His black paintings are described this way. The suite was made of 3 separate sets of 7 panels, each surface spray painted with enamel or lacquer, and on each a delicate cross is emblazoned, with every cross a slightly different colour sliding across the spectrum. So of course these are a rainbow. This is an image of the only suite of black paintings in existence from 1968. The 2 other suites, as I understand it from Hortedy's long-time art dealer in Auckland, Sue Crockwood, were broken or completely lost. Hortedy wanted the work to kind of reflect the viewer looking. The glass surface acts as a kind of a mirror or a window. So the small show that I put together called Black Rainbow was really a tribute to Hōtiri and his mastery, his knowledge and his skill. It was developed as an acknowledgement of him in his 82nd year and became more poignant in some ways after his passing, a month and a few days before the opening at the end of April this year. The show was also an acknowledgement. I'll just show you some other black paintings. So this is also made in 1968. It's lacquer on board or acrylic on board. This is acrylic on canvas. Can't even see it. This one is based on a poem or a wordplay by a guy called Bill Manhire, and it's called Melody, Melody, Milady, Melody, and there was a number of those paintings. This painting here, or this is a lithograph, is from his Black Rainbow series. His Black Rainbow series were made every time there was a nuclear bomb let off in Mururoa in the Pacific. Ralph would make a print to kind of acknowledge that kind of disaster, but also, kind of to mark what was going on. He was a very political kind of artist. So the show was also an acknowledgement of a younger Māori artist, Michael Parikōwhai, his standing and status as a Māori international and as an inheritor of Hōtiri's practice. Now, when I say inheritor, I don't think that Michael was directly influenced by Hōtiri's work, and I don't see literal references of Hōtiri's work in his work. I think Michael instead comes from a similar position as Hōtiri, as a very individual artist, and was able to occupy the space where Hōtiri and others broke the ground, like in the acknowledgement and acceptance within the art mainstream, and was able to enjoy the freedom artists like Hōtiri and other Māori artists at that time opened up for this next generation. In 1996, curator George Hubbard, in the context of his exhibition Korurangi, New Māori Art, held at Auckland Art Gallery Toi o Tamaki, wrote, "Ralph is an anchor stone, an inspiration. He really did open the way for a lot of younger artists to explore mediums not traditionally associated with contemporary Māori art, whatever that is." Although generationally distinct, I think there's a resonance between both their practices. There's a whakatauki or a Māori saying that kind of describes the relationship between these two artists, and it goes, "Mā te tuakana ka tuitika te taina, mā te taina ka tuitika te tuakana," meaning by the older person the younger learns, by the younger person the older learns. Technically, their work is extremely refined. Both pay extreme attention to surface and remove any sense of the hand. Conceptually, their work is layered and grounded within a strong sense of connection to place. And with that, a relationship, I think, to their position as Māori artists with aesthetic and conceptual relationships to their respective iwi, even if they, and iwi is tribe, even if not overt or perhaps intentional. I also think their work moves beyond those boundaries and that cultural specificity, as both are well versed in the traditions and histories of, Western fine art. This is another work of Hōtiri's, a much later one. A key tenet of Michael's work, proposed through the writing of curator Robert Leonard, is the recoding of European culture to speak of Māori concerns. Hōtiri kind of went further. A formalist, he was a meticulous maker of objects, but he was also a humanist, devoted to causes and had a long and complex relationship with radicalism. The colour black became a signature for Hōtiri. He belongs to a family of black colour painters, Goya, Matisse, Robert Motherwell, Malevich, Ed Reinhardt, and there are others. David Eggleton, in his essay Absence to Presence in the Black Light exhibition catalogue about Hōtiri's practice, says, Ed Reinhardt confirmed black could be texture, just as McCann, a foremost New Zealand painter, had shown it could be text. In a sense, Hōtiri learns something from every artist he encounters and offers back what he has learnt as something remade, added to and ready to be absorbed. To me, Hōtiri's black is also a te au Pauri, Māori, Catholic black. Ralph was brought up a Catholic, a Māori French form of Catholicism, brought to the Hokianga where Hōtiri is from in 1835 by French Bishop Jean-Baptiste Francois Pompelier. Hōtiri's repeated use of the cross and perhaps reflects his Māori Catholic faith. Curator Ian Weddy commented on a sense of deep spirituality in Hōtiri's work and the many elegant and meticulous ways in which he claimed the colour black as his signature. Michael's He Kōrero Pūrākau mō te awa nui o te motu, Story of a New Zealand River. This is this piano work here. Being fully carved, to me, is also perhaps a nod to his whakapapa in history, a reference perhaps to the amazing East Coast Māori carving tradition seen in meeting houses like Ruatapupuki, held in the Field Museum, and Te Hauki Tūranga, held at Te Papa, which is part of a treaty claim and will be returned to Rongo-Whakaata, the iwi or origin community that whanenui belongs to in 2017. And also to the work of carvers Rihari Rukupo through to more contemporary East Coast carvers Penny Taiapa and John Taiapa. Michael connects tribally through his father to the east coast of New Zealand. Just show you some more images. And has connections to iwi like Rongo-Whakaata. He quotes Ngāti Whakarongo and Ngā Ariki of the east coast as two of his iwi. He Kōrero is autobiographical, with the carvings of it symbolic of his Ngā Ariki meeting house called Tāwhiri Kura, even though carved by a non-Māori carver. He said he wanted the carvings to look amateurish, to be an uncomfortable fit in both a European and a Māori context, for He Kōrero to look like an authentic fake. He also talked about his father having a completely different reading of He Kōrero than anyone else because it was so personal. And his sister talks about He Kōrero's transition. It started off as a black piano and moved to red. And she talks about that transition in very Māori terms. Michael's work brings to mind singular contemporary artists like Jeff Koons and Damien Hirst, amongst others. He himself, as can be seen in his work in Sakahàn, My Sister, Myself, cites Marcel Duchamp as a key influence on his work, but it is again a mix of many things. Duchamp's stool and bicycle wheel, artist as performer, with the seal balancing the stool and bicycle wheel on its nose. Also about the close working relationship he shares and has shared with his older sister Kushla Parikuwhai, who often named and wrote about his work and probably provided the literary references for his Venice Biennale work on first looking into Chapman's Homer. And the seal, which comes out of his whakapapa or genealogy as a family kaitiaki or totem. I wanted to finish with some writing again of David Eagleton's from an essay he wrote for the Black Rainbow exhibition. At the centre of New Zealand's biculturalism is a jostling tension that reveals itself in the overlays of language, place names and stories. Michael Parikuwhai's art emerges from that context. I'm just going to give you some more views. Parikuwhai has proved he is an illusionist who can make materials appear to levitate, embodying lightness of touch and quickness of thought. In its scale and its intensity and its intention to surfaces, his work identifies itself with the fetish finish of industrial technology. Parikuwhai is also a jokester. His made-over ready-mades employ goofiness, brightness and shine to dazzle and amuse and to challenge. He Kōrero is a magnificent, riddling object. The cherry gloss that signals its status as a luxury commodity looks almost edible. The object is red hot, its meanings evolving and mutating before our very eyes. I'll just give you a final shot. That's it. Thank you very much.